I wanted to tell everybody about my Dark Sun Wargame. It always gets a lot of attention, well, relative to my account at least, a lot of attention when I put it out on Twitter. Uh, Gets a lot of likes, doesn't get a lot of replies. So I'm not sure if the likes are for Dark Sun or for the war game, but it always is one of my best performers as far as analytics. So I thought it was time that I did a movie on it and see if I could get some people to play it with me or go play it with you and your friends and let me know how it works. This is not a commercial project. I'm not out to make any money. I understand that Dark Sun is an IP that is owned by a company. This is simply a fan-created, made-up little game. I don't intend to impugn on any IP copyrights. I haven't used any artwork nor plan to use any artwork in the distribution of this little system, for profit or otherwise. Now, if you at home have artwork or are talented in art, I am not, perhaps you would like to make a more thematic set of cards that go with this game. I'd love to see it. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think there's anything illegal with that as long as it's for your own personal use in your own home. So, and I'll explain what the cards entail, and you can see as we go along. So, the game rules are pretty light, pretty basic. They're part of a generic set of rules that I use for a variety of different genres or themes, whatever term you want to use. It's just an empire building game, and it needs to be tweaked or changed a little bit for the different systems, but generally it's a foundation, it's a basic set of rules that people can learn and apply to all these games. I like to have standardization like that. I've made them historical units. I've made a system for the American Civil War, for the Second World War, for Napoleonic Wars. I've made Star Treks, Star Wars, 40K, Battletech. Pretty much all my favorite things. I've made a little version of this based on the same generic set of rules, reskinned. So for the Dark Sun version, I have a map of Athas that I'm going to use. Here it is. Oops. This little hex map. Not extremely detailed, doesn't need to be for what I do. Has a couple of the major areas on it, and I just fight over that. Everybody has a starting place, one of the cities on the map, and the cities have a value. So you can make this more detailed, you can use your own, you can use a different section of the realm, whatever works for you. This pretty much open. So I like to develop this kind of thing where you, the player, can make decisions and have options about how you want to do it. So these are the components, the map. When you write your own map or use somebody else's map or whatever, the cities or other significant areas should have a revenue value assigned. You can do that through any scheme you want, randomly, whatever you think looks right, however you want to do it, but they should be varied in number, and that creates some strategic or tactical problems. There's things to fight over, basically. The more of these geographical areas that have a revenue output that one side owns, the more units they can put in the field. It just represents the war economy. So I use Tabletop Simulator myself. If you're lucky enough to have the means and the room for real miniatures, it can work that way. Here's some of the tabletop miniatures that I use. These are Warhammer Fantasy. There's D&D, there's War Machine, there's all sorts of models that are on Tabletop Simulator that can work to be adapted to this or any other fantasy war game. So that's what I use. But if you don't have the room or don't have the means, there's a 2D version to use as well. There's custom cards. Here's another thing. I personally am not, as I said, not very good with graphics. So my cards are just functional, basic 3x5 cards that you can make on Tabletop Simulator. But you can, you know, doll them up as you like. It'd be really neat if somebody with the talent and the tools could make a real thematic set of this. You know, I don't know, maybe you wouldn't be comfortable distributing it for fear of IP violation or whatever, but at least putting it out on Twitter or Insta or something for us to see would be great. So the other thing you need is chits. I make custom chits on Tabletop Simulator. Those are pretty easy to do. I use little gold plastic medallions that have been modeled on Tabletop Simulator to represent the gold pieces in this game. I'll let you download this word processing document so you can read it. I wrote a little ditty about the IP thing that I've already told you, I think maybe twice, so you don't need to go through that. If you're going to make two-dimensional units, there is these set of stats that you may want to put on for visual reference, or make little war game chits if you want. I could see somebody making a kind of old Avalon Hillish hex encounter game out of this as well, you know, without the miniatures. I may even do that. But put the speed of the unit, and those are all explained down in the chart below as well. Total number of soldiers in that, or total number of units in the game. If you're into balance, if you don't want the thing to spiral out of control. A lot of people are worried about it being too big of a game to play or whatever, getting, you know, too hard to finish. Well, one of the ways to fix that is there's an optional limit that you can impose if you want, so that nobody's army gets too big and doesn't become too unwieldy to handle. So units have different types. That'll also be explained. And then the composition of the unit on a tactical battlefield. I like to use miniatures to fight out the battles. Now here again, you get into where people say, "Well, God, you know, that would take forever if you got too many people out there and all that." Well, perhaps so, but not every battle I fight out with miniatures. But the more interesting ones, or the more balanced ones, or at least the ones that have the most significance to the conclusion of the game in total. So, but that's up to you. You could play the thing without ever using the tactical battlefield, but if you do want to, having a composition of each unit so that it can be translated to these many miniature stands or whatever on the tactical battlefield would be helpful. Probably doesn't really need to be on the card itself, maybe a separate chart or something, but here again, up to you. The force score, the force number is the attack or combat value of the unit. If you want to use the quick resolution battles, we'll go through that next. Or you want to, just make it a kind of hex and counter type of game where you ratio up the forces. I suppose you could do it that way too. So again, to limit the size, you can agree on, how many soldiers are represented by a stand or a unit or something like that. So it's scalable. You can make it as big or as little as you want. It's up to you. Pretty simple stuff, almost like a game of war if you want to use the quick resolution battles. You just add up the total force value, and if one stack has a leader, the other does not, that stack excuse me, gets a bonus for that leader being there of 5. The side with the highest value wins. The losing stack must retreat 1 space and lose half of its forces. The winner picks those cards. Now you can do that blind. You can do that where they can shuffle through them, although that's kind of nasty. Or maybe you feel that 50% casualties is too strong. I've often felt that too. And my next step or improvement or change might be to include some sort of combat resolution table or something like that, or casualty table. I don't want to make it too complicated, but that may be, I created that in the idea of simplicity, but it is awfully bloody. So anyway, there's a turn sequence just like all war games. You draw cards based on how many units you have. There's a second deck of cards that are event cards. You have to have so many in your hand at any one time, or at any one turn. So you draw to fill up that hand. Make your moves, fight your battles. If you've gained more revenue spaces, then you increase your revenue. You draw that revenue at the end of the turn. Buy your troops, pay your upkeep. The other way to help balance things is that the bigger your army, the bigger the upkeep. So you got to pay to keep them in the field as well. So, and control phase. Why does the control phase last? Because if you take it takes 1 turn to get the factory online, or the unit, or the whatever the facility or geographical area is that develops war units. There's a 1 turn gap between change of ownership. So when you take a city, say it's a city, you put the control marker down, but you don't flip it over until the next turn. Then you can draw revenue from it. Here's the draw phases. A little more detail. I'm not going to go through every one of these. These are the kind of things you can read through. I have a Twitter account. I have an email. Feel free to I'll put it in with the download. So if you have any questions, if anything needs clarity, I can provide it for you. But just in the interest of being brief, I'm going to move down through the more detailed explanations of what I just went through there. Here's the unit deck. These are all the different types of troops involved. Movement. Here we'll go through the abbreviations so you know what they move. Slow. Move 1 hex or space if you want. That's why I say if you do area movement, be careful, because you don't want them make the areas too big. Otherwise the troops will move in an unrealistically fast pace. So medium is 2 hexes, fast is 3 hexes. So the force, we already went through that. That's the total combat power. And whether it's a fortification or not. Fortifications have a set of rules we'll go through next, but they should be fairly self-explanatory. And then the optional rule of how many to limit for the totality of the game. This isn't limiting how many you can have in your... Well, you could play it that way if you really prefer that option. But my intent was to limit it to the totality of the game, which makes it super small. But people are all about instant and fast, so that's why I came up with that. But if you feel a medium, a happy medium would be to limit it to each army. There's 5 armies. There's 5 people to play this. You don't really necessarily need a maximum of 5. I believe it would run better with the 5. So you go through, you can see all the different troops. I don't know if I went too fast for you to see, but that all is provided with you. And they're thematic troops mostly. So then there's the event cards, and they all have notes that are fairly self-explanatory. If any are unclear, contact me. I'll clear them up for you. I don't think it would behoove anybody for me to go through them one by one here right now. I'm trying to keep this brief. But you can see, just little things to, the usual kind of system for a lot of these types of games. A couple of backstabbing things. I tried not to make anything that was too ridiculous. And if you sometimes I don't like the kill general cards and stuff like that. They've had those in other systems similar to this, like if you're familiar with Battle Cry. And the easiest way, if you feel a card is unbalanced, simply don't make it or omit it from the deck for your game. Easiest way to do it. Like Slaughter or something like that. And that pretty much takes